Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And in today's episode, we're doing a classic Decision Space deep dive of Planet Unknown, a polyomino game in which each player has their own personal planet and they're trying to fill it up with tiles in the style of games like Patchwork. And I'm really excited to dive into this one. It has some novel little twists, lots of interconnected systems that I think will make for an engaging conversation, and really interesting stuff in terms of the objectives in the game and also the mini games in a way. And it's also just a game about tracks in a way that we haven't really covered in a long time and that I like way more than I expected.
Very few games I feel that we play and we know as immediately like we have to deep dive this game.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to talk about this one. I think people are in for a good episode. But before we do that, Brendan, do you want to read a recent review that we got for our podcast?
I would love to. Okay, so this review is from the Pete Wiss. Is that right, Jake?
Yeah.
Okay. The Nerdiest Board Gaming Podcast is the title. And of course, it is 5 stars. So Pete says, I consume a lot of tabletop hobby content, and in a world full of 10-minute micro reviews, Decision Space stands out. This is the most inside baseball discussion for gamers that I have encountered, and I'm here for it. Most content creators make videos or podcasts about games they've probably only played once or twice, and this makes everything feel like I'm just reading the back of the box. Jake and Brendan really do the academic work of dissecting a game that is only possible after playing it a ton. This show is for the try-hard obsessive nerds in your game group, like me. The goofy banner is just the icing on the cake. I hope they can keep it going because I cannot imagine how exhausting it must be to create this kind of quality work on a weekly schedule.
Thank you, Pete, for the incredibly kind 5-star review. Pete is a local board gamer and designer to St. Louis, so fortunate to game with Pete in person. He's kind of famous for being kind of a wealth of knowledge for trick-taking games. So one of my goals for 2024 is to have Pete on the show to talk about trick-taking games. Pete's also been a bit of a mentor towards me on my game design journey. He's a little bit ahead of where I'm at. And one of my other goals for this year is to share a little bit more about my game design journey. So just this morning, as of recording, I had kind of an embarrassing learning moment for game design that I just wanted to quickly share on the podcast for anybody who's interested in sort of following along with me. So I have designed a little card game called Chicken Wild. I made a sell sheet for it, and I recently, before Christmas break, sent it around to maybe 10 publishers, just seeing if people would be interested. And I got one email back that seemed like a publisher that was pretty intrigued from Europe. They asked me to send them a physical prototype. So I did that just before break. And this morning, they sent me an email saying that the prototype arrived safe and sound. However, they asked me to please choose a lower value on the package next time because they had to pay 30 euros to receive the prototype.
What?
I was so embarrassed because I had, first of all, I've never sent a prototype or really mail of any kind to Europe before,
How much did you say it was worth?
So I said it was $100, even though it was just a deck of cards.
What?
And
This is amazing.
I really can't defend myself at all. The clerk at the post office said, "How much is this worth?" I was like, "It's just a deck of cards, like maybe $10." And she's like, "Usually we just put like $100." And I was like, "Is that like a higher cost to me?" And she said, "No, I think that's just for if it gets lost, like then you get like reimbursed." And I was kind of like, at that point, I was like not really certain of anything, and I could kind of like justify it to myself. I was like, well, the sleeves plus like the time and labor that went into this, like sure, whatever. So I just signed off on that and embarrassed myself pretty significantly. So I asked to please be allowed to reimburse them for the cost. But yeah, anyway, that lesson learned, okay? Like, don't follow my mistake if you're probably nobody would, but hey, if you don't know, you don't know. And I definitely didn't know. So I just thought that was worth a PSA so that nobody else in this kind of game design journey makes the same mistake that I did.
On the bright side, you got an email back from the publisher. So that's great. And on the bright side, again, the bright side is you've left a lasting memory about the game in their minds,
Yeah, they're just
positive or negative,
yeah,
right? Like, I
yeah,
think that's half the battle, Jake. So thanks for sharing that anecdote. That's hilarious.
yeah. Anyway, okay, let's get into what people actually clicked on this episode for and do our reviews of Planet Unknown. Brendan, do you want to start with your review? Because I've just been talking a lot.
Heck yeah. Planet Unknown is a bit like a prog rock light polyomino board game. It's bombastic, driving, ambitious, if not maybe a bit scattered. I admire both the straightforward design decisions, the rock solid grid puzzle, the overlaid rover movement pathing puzzle that connects with the meteor system when drafting tiles, and the life pods when placing them, and the game end trigger depending on when the players fill their board. This is a game that makes the most of a lot of light systems to draw out something more interesting than any one disconnected version of these systems could ever be on their own. While I love the novelty of the asymmetric boards, at times it can feel like playing an entirely different game than the player across the table from you. Almost, at least. And Planet Unknown suffers a bit from option creep in its rules, presenting just a few too many variants that don't all feel fully developed. But at its core, Planet Unknown is a blast, and I enjoy it far more than I feel I should for a light polyomino game built on the foundation of pushing cubes up tracks. 8 out of 10.
Great. When I played Planet Unknown for the first time, and I played this a ton online, and I played it only once in person. So I'm thinking back to that first in-person play. I had a great time playing the game, but very few games that I've played really since I've entered the modern board game hobby, excuse me. Whew, have I like walked away from feeling like this is just really sloppy. Like I feel like there is just some sloppy design in this game, but I kind of love it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what that says about me, and I'll get into like I don't think this is me being pedantic. I think there's just like some objective things about this game that are like very fair to criticize from a balance perspective, from like a player experience perspective, but it just all comes together and it is a total blast to play. I had a great time playing in person. I've had an even better time exploring the game as a 2-player game than I thought I would. I think that might be my preferred way to play. So I want to talk about that. And I really love this game. I think it's an interesting case study for game design. I can't wait to get into it. I'm going to give it an 8.7 out of 10.
Oh
I
my
don't think it,
gosh.
I think the sloppiness makes it like not quite like I felt like I can't give it a 9, but I want to say more than 8.5. So that's where I'm going.
Amazing. Sloppy and granular ratings. I love it. You're not wrong.
You know, it's like a Jackson Pollock painting. Like that's
Yeah,
beat, but it's still art, you know?
totally.
So let's get into the game background.
Okay, so this is, I think we haven't historically covered a lot of Kickstarter games, or this is actually not a Kickstarter game. It is a game found game on decision space. And
Ooh,
part of that is
excuse
that,
me.
yeah, excuse me, wrong crowdfunding platform. But Planet Unknown is one of those games. It came out, it was officially released in 2022 from Adams at Apple Games and was designed by Ryan Lambert and Adam Rayberg, who are frequent co-designers. I myself wasn't familiar with a lot of their other titles, but they have about 5 or so plus titles each, 4 of which I believe were co-designed, maybe more. So they're 2 designers who often work together, and that's most of the game background for Planet Unknown. I felt it was important to mention the crowdfunding aspect, at least because since we haven't had that conversation on Decision Space a lot about, oh, it feels like there's a lot in this box. It feels like maybe it's not fully, feels like a bit of a hodgepodge that you see sometimes from sort of crowdfunding games where there's an incentive to get more and more and more stuff in the box to drive hype. I think we feel it a little bit here. There's just a lot, but a lot of it's really good, actually. And I think we'll get into talking about some of that. And Jake, I'm realizing you mentioned, we talked about the asymmetric corporations, which are your sort of unique powers, but then there's also unique planets that you can play with. You can also play with like symmetric planets. There's event cards. There's there's
Different goals and
objectives.
objectives.
Yeah.
Wait, what event cards? There's event
Yeah,
cards?
there's an event module with
I don't
20
think I've
event
I
cards.
don't think I've played that.
I never turned it on for us.
Okay.
Yeah. There's
Okay,
enough going on. We played it like 20 times, There was like plenty to explore in that 20 pieces.
just the experience of playing and exploring this game. I don't know that it almost felt like My City or something where every single time we played this game, we played like 20
We
times.
played a different version of the game.
It was totally different. I just like
Yeah.
kept thinking like eventually I'm gonna get a repeat like world or corporation. And towards the end, yeah, I started seeing some repeats, but there is just a tremendous amount of content, and I think it's really exciting the direction that the designers took this game, because it's not like it's not like small iterations on the theme that you might see where balance is the driving design ethos. It does feel like the designers have chosen each little element that they could have and taken it to like the wonkiest possible place. And
Yeah.
I just think that's really exciting.
I think some games too, Jake, you can see like, oh, not they didn't put every idea they had in this box. And here it feels like every idea they had kind of ended up in the box. But luckily, Ryan and Adam had a lot of amazing ideas. There's really cool stuff in this box. So every time I got to play with a new asymmetric planet, I was like, oh, this totally changes the game, and it's a fun version of a fun game that I enjoy.
Right.
So yeah.
Very cool. So, Brendan, should we jump into your previously recorded rules overview to give people a better idea of how to play this game and meet them back on the other side for our classic deep dive discussion?
Planet Unknown is a light polyomino tile-laying game in which players have a personal planet board that turn by turn they attempt to fill with 6 different types of tiles: Civ, Water, Biomass, Rover, Technology, and Energy. 4 of these tile types correspond to tracks shown on each player's personal board. When a player places a tile on their planet, each polyomino tile depicts sections of 2 types. They move a marker up the track or tracks which match the type of tile placed. Moving up tracks can provide helpful benefits like points, bonus movement of additional tracks, special Civ cards, rover movement for a novel pathing minigame all about picking up life pods and meteorites from a player's planet, new technologies which typically amend the rules of the game, and more. A novel twist in Planet Unknown is its drafting system. All the tiles in the game are placed in a Lazy Susan, which rotates freely and is split into 6 segments. Each player takes turns being the station master, which allows them to rotate the Lazy Susan such that one of these 6 segments is in front of them, from which they can pick from 2 tiles: a large tile, usually showing a meteor but allowing them to fill their board more quickly, or a smaller tile. Each other player then places a tile from the segment in front of them on the Lazy Susan. In a 2-player game, however, the Lazy Susan is simply rotated 1 segment each turn. Players receive points for filling up rows and columns on their board, collecting life pods and meteorites by using their rovers, by accomplishing objectives shared with their neighbors, and by moving up the 4 primary tracks in the game. The game is most likely to end when a player can no longer place a tile validly on their board during a turn. They still get to move up the tracks of the tile they might have placed. It can also end when a Lazy Susan depot, one of the places where the tiles are placed, runs out completely, and when either of these things happen, the player with the most points is crowned the victor.
Thank you, Brendan, for taking the time to record that. Hopefully, people now have a better sense of what's going on in this crazy game called Planet Unknown. Should we start where we always do and characterize the overall decision space of this game?
Yeah, I think we absolutely should. Okay, so what we typically do is we talk about the size and depth. This is an interesting one, Jake, because for me, Planet Unknown, this it's an overlaid objectives game, right?
Mhm.
You are trying to accomplish lots of different things at the same time. You're not choosing between objective A and objective B. You are trying to accomplish objective A, objective B, and objective C all at the same time as efficiently as possible.
Right. So let's take just the space game, the starter world and starter corporation. Even in that most simplified version of the game, you're always going to be trying to, the
Fill up your rows
overlaid
and columns.
objectives that we're talking about. You're trying to complete rows on your board, you're trying to complete columns on your board, you're trying to scoop up life pods, you're trying to collect meteors, and you're trying to complete objectives. In the multiplayer game, you'll be trying to complete personal objectives and competing with the player on the right and left for an objective just between you two. In the 2-player game, you have 3 shared objectives that you're all going for. So even, that is kind of the core outline of the game, and there's a lot of overlaid objectives going on, to be sure.
And then on top of all of that, okay, so the objectives are driving the game. So that's a huge part of what's informing, right? Like the objectives are the game. That's informing what you're trying to do. But within that, I think one of the things that I find most interesting about Planet Unknown is it's so hard because there's so many things in this game that we could talk about. But I think I
Yeah.
want to talk about the pathing, the rover puzzle really quickly, because for me, that's something that makes this game just spark to life. So going on while you're just laying tiles on the board like a normal polyomino game, you're also moving these little rover pieces around, likely just one, maybe two, later on in the game, depending on your unique corporation that's going to your unknown planet, trying to collect meteorites, like Jake said, and also life pods. And that's a really fun little efficiency game that sort of forces you to think about how you might build out your polyominoes across the board. You still, most of the time, have to place adjacent to tiles you've already placed. And the first tile you place has to be on the edge of your planet. And I say most of the time because Planet Unknown has a lot of rules on thanks to its tech tracks, which are unique to each corporation. That just the rules, they break the rules of the game. So even on the baseboard, you fairly quickly get to the point where the adjacency placement
I
rule
think
doesn't apply anymore.
I think it's like the first tech
Yeah.
you unlock, maybe.
Yep.
And it's just all of a sudden this like core rule that you were just taught.
Is
Okay,
gone.
here's it's a tile placement game. You have to build tiles adjacent to each other. Cool. I've got that. I've played a lot of games like this. You play for 5 minutes, it's like you can put tiles anywhere. Like, okay, well
And
that's
then
different.
and that really explodes the decision space, because then there's so much thinking about, okay, I can see the tiles that I might draft down in this lazy Susan shared in front of us, which I talked about in the rules overview, but to mention again, there's this really cool sort of plastic piece that's in front of everyone that physically spins, and it shows 6 different segments that are each filled with tiles of 2 different sizes in these depots. And whoever is the station master in a multiplayer game gets to move it around and choose which segment they want in front of them and pick a tile from one of them. So you have tons of options on a given turn that you could place, combined with being able to place anywhere. There's a lot to think about on any given turn of Planet Unknown. But luckily, the objectives are not complicated. They're very clear and straightforward. So you most of the time have a good sense for what you're trying to accomplish at any given point in time.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know. I'm flailing a bit here. There's so much.
what I've already identified just in the beginning of this conversation is Planet Unknown is kind of like the Magic the Gathering of tile
Polyomino games
placement games, just in the sense that there's an exception to
for
every
every,
rule
yeah,
that we're talking about. And also, I think another apt comparison as we talk about the decision space is the decision space changes based on what you're trying to do at a given point in the game. Brendan, you might be trying to do a rover puzzle where I'm just trying to end the game. I'm trying
right.
to just fill up my board with the biggest possible pieces to trigger the game end condition, which is when as soon as any player can't place a piece legally, that's the last turn of the game. So if I feel like I'm ahead, maybe I'm just trying I'm the beatdown in that
You want to
situation.
make a mess.
I just want to make a mess, and I'm just going to go ahead and try and wrap up the game as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody else is doing something totally different with their tracks, which I think I neglected to mention
Yeah.
as a very important objective in the game. So I think that's sort of where the decision space lies. Is I think where the decision space is most interesting is in identifying what you're trying to do
Mm,
at this point in the game state. And often that'll be I'm trying to advance up a certain track, right? I want to like get this goal on a track next. Like if I'm trying to go up the blue track, right? I'm trying to maybe go up 2 spaces, get another point reward, or I get some other bonus on that track. And I think that's really interesting. And that feels like a big decision space. But then once you've identified what you want to do, your options are generally are sufficiently limited that it's really easy, I think, to kind of hone in and make the best play towards that goal. And then I think winning or losing is kind of more dependent on the former, like identifying what you should be doing in the game state with the game state, than it is on the latter, which is like the tactical implementation of your plan, which gets pretty straightforward.
yep. I think that's right, Jake. And The cool thing too also is that sometimes you really care about where you're placing tiles on your planet, right? I want to be filling up those rows and columns like Jake said. I'm playing a classic polyomino efficiency tiling game where I don't care quite as much about what type of tiles I'm placing. I just want to place the right shape of tiles. And then sometimes because of the tracks like we mentioned, where you're trying to move up these really 4 key tracks, but also there's 5 tracks in the game, all of which do matter. And then there's 6 types of tiles because there's a wild-ish resource. Sometimes you just care, oh, I really need to get a water tile. I don't really care if I mess up my tiling game because if I get to the top of this water track, I get gobs of points. So any type of water I can throw down my board, I need to get it there because it's so many points that it's okay if it causes me problems later on. And I think that's a really fun twist that justifies the tracks in a way which normally feel really dry, is that they add so much texture to the tiling game because they're sort of forcing you to factor in the sort of potential benefits there and the ways in which you might sort of lean into placing a tile that you otherwise wouldn't, just because you want that type of resource on your board or in that place because of an objective even.
Yeah, and there's a real sense of like tempo to that as
Yeah.
well because
Yes.
early in the game you can be more focused on trying to fit your pieces together nicely so that you leave yourself plenty of opportunity to fill in spaces, complete the columns and rows, which are kind of your baseline point getting operandus. But later in the game, I only have 2 or 3 turns left, and I'm 2 spaces away from the top of the water track. So
Yeah.
now I'm throwing everything out the window because I need to get to the top of that track, and I care a lot less about placing things neatly. So overall, Brendan, I think it's pretty clear to me that this is a waning decision space
Yeah.
game. I think that is typically what we find in the polyomino place
Genre.
and genre. And I think that's true here with the caveat that because of the way the tech tracks on various boards, you're like we mentioned with the baseboard, your decision space actually gets bigger at one point in the game once you unlock the ability that you don't have to do adjacency anymore. So there are definitely, I think, more dynamic elements that you find here than in other more straightforward games. And then another important distinction is that the multiplayer, the 3 and 4 player game, is more dynamic significantly than the 2 player game. Because in the 3 player game, when it's your turn, you can put the lazy Susan anywhere. You can pick
Yeah.
any bay to put any tile available. The world is your oyster. So that's a huge decision space that comes around infrequently. Where in the 2 player game, the lazy Susan just clicks around clockwise every turn. So you're always kind of confronted with that aspect of the decision space is more straightforwardly waning.
Which
So
is kind of like Patchwork, honestly,
yeah,
because you can look ahead.
and I honestly think that works better for this
Yeah.
game for
Yeah.
me. I don't feel like I get and I think that's an interesting kind of decision space takeaway of the game because I think a lot of people might think that this game I'm actually curious what it says on Board Game Geek, like if people vote like what the best player count is.
Mm.
Because I feel like it might be that people would assume that the higher player count works better because it feels like more value out of that component, the lazy
Yeah.
Susan component, when you get to, kind of swivel it around however you like. But I find that it just adds more randomness in kind of an unsatisfying way,
Yeah.
at least for me.
You lose a lot of the planning. I looked it up real quickly, Jake, while we were talking. So Planet Unknown plays 1 to 6 players, and it on BGG people think it plays best at 4. I really like it at 2 also. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yeah.
What do you think about the feel of this game? I think sometimes polyomino games are associated with a bit of a harsh feel, especially towards the end. So often how a game ends is what imprints our memory of our experience of that game. So something like Patchwork can feel really brutal and harsh. Uh, it's tough not to compare polyomino games to Patchwork. So go listen to our Patchwork episode if you've never played that game. But there's -1s all over your board, and functionally, Planet Unknown kind of has that, but it hides it, and instead you just get benefits for filling up rows and columns. So it's almost as if the board was covered in minus decimals of a point everywhere, but it doesn't show you that you have to finish a row and column to get the points. And then also, so it feels less harsh. because you oftentimes, especially in the symmetric version, can shed the tile placement rule, it feels a little bit less harsh. And I think oftentimes because you have the option of picking a smaller tile or a larger tile always, that choice between two, which really matters for game end tempo and pacing, like you said, Jake. There's real efficiency considerations in terms of what you're feeling, but it feels a little bit more flexible usually, because if you get yourself into a bad spot, usually you have access to nice small tiles. It's not a game like Isle of Cats or Patchwork that's throwing really strange polyominoes at you and saying, here, yeah, you think you're doing well, fit this weird H shape on your board, you know? It really, this tile shapes mostly tile fairly nicely together, or even My City for that matter, where you're sort of feeling oftentimes like, oh wow, I really wish I could place the mirror version of this tile. In Planet Unknown, you can flip them and turn them in any way you want. So oftentimes I think as far as the spectrum of harshness in terms of these games go, it doesn't feel harsh when you're playing. It feels bountiful. It's a game of doing lots of stuff and them wanting you to have a dopamine hit every turn.
Yeah. I think that is a huge component of the feel. So I'm glad you touched on that. It feels like the design has leaned into kind of the Candy Crushification board game, right?
Yeah.
Every single turn, no, there is no denying it. You will be advancing on a track.
You make progress no matter what you do.
Or
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
two
usually
tracks
2
usually.
tracks, almost
Yeah.
always 2 tracks.
Yeah.
So you're always making progress in this game no matter what, and that feels good. And I think the other, like, the harshness of, at the end of the day, I think it is true in Planet Unknown as it is in other polyomino games that, being good at spatial reasoning, like being able to plan ahead and think about ways that you can combine shapes into sort of like a satisfying, cluster that's gonna fill your board is advantageous, but that is drastically undermined by the game end condition, which is that as soon as somebody can't go anymore, the game is over for everybody.
Yep.
And so I think that impacts the feel as well, because you could be doing a super good job trying to fill up your board in a tidy, neat way where, the person who's just like chaotically picking the largest pieces every time and ends the game early, if they're getting there are, yeah, like there are other ways to do well point wise. Sometimes you can do well in this game by doing a really good job neatly filling up your board, and sometimes, the rush down strategy of just like picking big tiles can undermine that significantly. So, it feels like a game where everybody's going to kind of like have fun, whether or not
Yeah.
you even like really love the Tetris aspect of these games.
And a nice thing about that too, again, the duality between the board puzzle informing the track puzzle, the track incentives and the track incentives informing the board, is that if someone's playing that more rush down type, I'm going to fill my board up as quickly as possible, I want to end the game as fast as possible. Maybe they're focusing on really moving up 2 tracks. When you get to one of the end of track, there's usually a big point payout. Water pays out a ton of points if you get to the end of that track, and all the others give at least some form of a nice little lump of points at the end. Whereas other players, if they're trying to more evenly fill out their board, they're probably more focused not on the type of tiles they're placing, but the shape of those tiles. So
They'll
they're
be making
probably
a sacrifice to that end, one way or
right. Yeah,
another.
they're moving up more uniformly, so they're not going to get those points. It works really nicely. And then also, I love, Jake, that as you move up tracks, oftentimes you get to move up other tracks. This like bonus. There's a real combo-tastic feel to some turns in Planet Unknown, just because you can do a lot and accomplish a lot at times, because it has this sort of thing where if you move up here, you get the bonus of moving up a different track. Okay, I move up this track, then I get the bonus of moving up another track. Okay, I'm going to move up this track, and then I get to do my rover movement puzzle and move my rover a couple times. Oh, I picked up a life pod, and I'm playing sub corporation. Wherever I get a life pod, I get to make another decision. It just there's a lot going on.
What, I can't remember the term for it, but there's a symbol that you'll find on the tracks. It's like a spiral of all the colors,
Yeah,
and it might be called like Unity or something. But whenever you get that, you advance your marker to that. You get to immediately advance a marker again anywhere, and that literally feels like Bejeweled or Candy Crush. You're like, I
yeah,
did this, and then I get to come over here, and that lets me do this. It's like
yep,
it's a little tiny action chain that, like, try as you might, try to deny it, like your brain tells you that feels good.
yeah.
It's fun when it happens.
Ganshan clever too.
Right, exactly. A great example of that.
Okay, wait.
Okay,
Can I
yeah.
strategy non sequitur?
Okay.
Biomass patches. Do you think they're good?
iOS.
So
Oh,
when
so
you move up the biomass track, eventually you will get to these little spaces where you can place one by one tiles anywhere on your board. And they're like billed as this really good incentive. What do you think? I don't like this track. Do you not like this track?
No, I mean, I think they're good, but they are more niche than you'd think because
Yeah.
it is pretty easy in this game to not leave patches. Like,
Yeah.
you just have a lot more options on your turn, it feels like, than you do in a game like Patchwork, which is like
Yeah.
very difficult not to leave holes.
Yeah.
So the one by one patches you could get in that game are like they feel incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a
Here
gift from the gods. Yeah.
Yeah, here often you'll just have a one by one patch and you just like add to the edge of your thing that you're doing, and that doesn't feel good at all. So I found that if I know that I'm approaching a biomass space, then I might like change my strategy to like
Set up
leave
a
a
gap.
hole
Yeah.
on purpose.
Yeah.
And then that can feel pretty nice. I think that's kind of its best use is when you're opting for bigger tiles, which are often more difficult to neatly fit together, then the biomass track works pretty well.
Thank you for humoring my mid-episode strategy non sequitur.
What do you think about? So, another really interesting thing about polyomino games is what games do with big tiles that are
Mm.
inherently better, which is true in this game as well because it's covering up more spaces, which helps you fill in your rows and columns better. In Patchwork, right, a lot of times the bigger tiles are either really expensive or they don't have as many buttons on them. How do you think big tiles feel to you in this game? Like, should you just be trying to use the big tile every single time?
So interestingly here, right? There's no buttons. So instead of a benefit, you get a downside. Kind of. So a lot of the big tiles have meteorites printed on them. So when you add these tiles to your board, they get struck by a meteorite, which your rover can pick up in the future. If you leave them on the board, then it counts as a gap. So long as that meteorite at the end of the game, if that's there, it's as if that space hasn't been filled in. So you have a real incentive to pick them up because you're losing out on filling in rows and columns. But if every 3 meteorites you pick up, you get a point. So it's this interesting downside that is ultimately probably an upside if you play your cards right, which is fun. Something like that. It gives you a good short-term planning, and where you place the tile and how you place the tile can start to matter, right? Oh, I need to place it where it's actually like rotated exactly this way, so it's directly next to another meteor, so I can set it up so that my rover can pick up 2 meteors with 2 movements instead of having to go 3 or whatever. You get that little bit of extra efficiency. I find that the big tiles are generally very good,
Yeah.
but with that said, the little tiles can still be really important, especially when there's specific tracks you just have to move up on, or when you're playing one of the zany planets in the asymmetric planets that are strangely shaped, and just force you, I think, into needing a little bit to play the tile shape game more than the tile type game. For example, Jake, there's this. Did you ever play Cerebus? This is the planet that's actually 3 small planets next to each other
I
that you're
don't
trying to
know if
fill
I
up.
ever managed to land on that one.
Okay. That's a cool one. We talked a lot in the Isle of Cats episode about how one of the really fun things about Isle of Cats is you're not just tiling a square grid, you're tiling a rectangular grid that's like tapered at the end. And I think Planet Unknown takes that to its logical conclusion by having you tile lots of interesting different shapes with its asymmetric planets. And its base planet is also kind of that way as well. It's this cool, like, it doesn't tile easily, but it tiles easily enough that it's rewarding when you get it done.
Yeah, and it can be as hard as you want in
Yeah.
this game. There's one with just like a giant black hole in the middle, so you just have like narrow columns all the way around the board. There's one that's just like random holes all over the place, which is like a tremendous pain in the ass. But I mean, that's great, right? Like, I think that is exactly what I'm talking about with like kind of leaning into like the exciting differences of the game. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying about large tiles. I think it kind of, and now as we like move into the last characteristic of decision space clarity, I think there's just so many competing things in this game that you want to think about that yes, you want to the big tiles in my opinion are inherently better than the small tiles. So you'll always pick them except for it might not be the right tracks that you're trying to advance, except for it might not be something that helps aid you in achieving one of your shared objectives that you're competing with your neighbor for. So that's kind of, I think, where the self balancing comes
Yeah.
in. It's just one of many sort of heuristics that you add into your arsenal, but it isn't going to be the end all be all.
Yep. Absolutely. I guess, okay, can I say one final thing about feel? You
Yeah.
kind of touched on it, and we don't need to stick to it because there's so many more interesting things to discuss. But I think another thing about the feel of this game that a certain subset of players will just have a hard time with, which is that if you're not playing symmetric planets and symmetric corporations, this game is not going to feel balanced at times. I just think it's not. But it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's just so fun. There's just no way all the different configurations of planets and corporations and everything could be truly equal, but there's enough going on and enough different ways you can get points that usually you have a fair enough shot and you're having enough fun trying out something new that it doesn't really feel like it matters.
Can we just talk about the asymmetry now?
Yeah,
Even
let's
though
do it.
we have it at the end in our notes, but I think it makes sense as a segue here, just because I totally agree with you. If you are somebody who really cares about balance in
And
board
yeah,
games, then I don't recommend Planet Unknown to you. Sure, you could play the base game, but I think that you would get tired of pretty quickly.
yeah,
I think a real strength of this game, because its core is so simple, is the variety offered by the tons of different boards, corporations, and planets. And I think it's important to talk about asymmetry here because we have talked about that on this podcast before, and kind of negatively. I think neither of us are huge fans of extreme faction asymmetry in highly interactive games like Root, for instance. And the part of the reason that I find that challenging is just because of the barrier to entry. If we're playing a game of Root, in order for me to meaningfully engage with the game, I have to know intimately what every other person is capable of doing. Planet Unknown at times feels extremely asymmetric. I don't know if it's as asymmetric as Root because you're always pretty much, it's not, because you're always doing the same core objectives, but it feels extremely asymmetric when you're using all the different modules offered in this game. But it just doesn't matter that I don't really fully understand what's going on with Brendan's board. It's like I have a board that he's working on 3 planets. I'm working on one with a giant black hole in the middle, and both of those have special rules associated with them. I'm working on a corporation board that allows me to move my cubes laterally across the different tracks, which is just completely game breaking. And honestly, I think super duper busted. I
and
found corporation to be incredibly strong, and Brendan's doing something else.
I'm like playing a rover. My rover puzzle is now a pick up and deliver game where I have to pick up meteorites and deliver them to actually score them.
Right. And we're both having a great time playing our game and doing really well, but we don't have to care or know. So it just
Yeah,
completely, it's a big strength of the multiplayer solitaire nature of this game that we're working on our own puzzles in our
yeah.
own player space, that it allows for that asymmetry to have a really low barrier of entry. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things about Planet Unknown, is that it gives you that same super fun asymmetry at a low barrier to entry. And I'm not sure that's something I've really experienced elsewhere as successfully.
So we've played this game a lot, Jake, but we haven't played it, 100 times. Do you think that part of what we're describing and talking about and having in this conversation is saying like the novelty of exploring the content in this game is really fun? Do you think that after 100 games you might tire of it? Or because of combining the different corporations with the different planets, there's just so many variations that it would kind of lastingly be interesting to you? And then also as a follow-up, well, no, I'll save my follow-up. Do you think it would lastingly be interesting to you?
Yeah, very a fair question. For me, I think I'm having had the most fun with Planet Unknown when I was playing a corporation for the first time,
Mm,
or a planet, and trying to figure it out.
yeah,
I think there's enough kind of variability that you can get so many plays out of this game. And I think there's also an expansion for this game called Supermoon that just I think adds a ton more stuff into the game as well.
no.
But yeah, I don't think it's a game that I would be playing 1,000 times, like a Castles of Burgundy, of just
Yeah,
kind of like the same few maps over and over, and feel like I'm still improving
yeah.
in that same way. I think like the core game perhaps to me isn't as engaging as that. But that negative review aside, like I've had such a fun time playing this game. Like I want to buy it and add it to my collection so I can show people.
Totally.
So
I
I mean
think
that's where I'm at with it. Like yeah, go ahead.
And I think another interesting thing about that, Jake, is that because of our perceived imbalance in the asymmetric boards and the planets, even somewhat, I think a real benefit is that you could play this game with almost anyone because a newer player, you could give one of the more straightforward sort of planet boards and one of the more straightforward corporations, and you could take what you perceive to be a pretty tough planet mixed with maybe not as strong of a corporation or one you're not as used to and try to make it work. And I think you could kind of balance the table a little bit more effectively if people wanted to do that in a way that you could keep it interesting for the new players and for you as someone who owns the game and wants to show it to people. And Planet Unknown, because of its table presentation and having the cool Lazy Susan, I think is a game that you do typically, it lends itself to showing other people. It's fun. There's enough novelty. Like any game that has a novelty factor that's fairly high is fun to show off, and it's fairly high here.
And it's quick, it's easy to teach.
Yeah.
So I think that's like all the hallmarks of a game that's like for me rewarding to have and show off as well. But it's it's probably a game that I want to play 25 to 50 times
Yeah.
instead of 1,000 times. And I mean I really hesitate to say that because I think that's like when people one thing I've found and I see it in our decision space community on Discord, I see it myself is people buy games with like the most aspirational mindset ever.
Yeah.
Right? People buy games hoping that it's something they're going to like play it until the cardboard turns to dust and they can like pass down to their kids and it's going to be like their all-time number one game. When as we all also know that buying a game for many of us who have way too many board games and many of the people in our community, many of the listeners of this show, not all, buying a game and playing it on the table 5 times, it should be held up as a success. And
Yeah.
if I feel like Planet Unknown is a game that you buy, you probably play it more than that, like 15, 20, 25 times because it's just so fun and you're going to want to show it off to people. And yet that might be kind of played out at that point for you.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Jake, can we talk about some of the systems in this game? Because there's so many. And I do just want to highlight, the more we're talking about this game, the more I was thinking about it when I was writing my review. I think the thing that is really special about Planet Unknown and why it succeeds is the interconnectedness of all of its systems. None of the systems are all that complicated. None of them are all that interesting from a sort of, a novel twist perspective, not like a novel, just like component perspective. It's just fairly straightforward. You want to fill up rows and columns. You're picking between 2 tiles. You have to pick up these meteorites that end up on your board. There's these life pods that you also want to pick up. You have to move up these tracks, but they all inform each other in little ways, right?
Yeah, I agree. I just want to say, I think like the biggest like hook for the game is actually a component hook, right?
Yes.
It's not even a gameplay thing. It's that you get a Lazy Susan to spin around on your table.
Yeah.
Which is very cool.
Yes. No, it is. But then the more you play, you sort of see, oh, it's so cool. Like the things that we've been talking about, right? Maybe I want to be picking large tiles and trying to fill up my board more quickly because that informs the game end timer. But maybe if I'm doing that, I'm not moving up my tracks enough. So maybe I actually want to be focusing on smaller tiles so I can fit these tiles I can get the tiles of the right type on my board, or like everything is so simple, but it just this if you took a pencil and you sort of like wrote the different systems down and then you drew a line between them, when you could think of a way that the decisions where you had to think about one of the other systems while making a decision engaging with one of them, I think you would really have a tightly connected map. Whereas some games, the connections aren't so direct and aren't so clear and aren't so interesting in terms of how immediately you can interact with them on a decision level, right? Like when I'm placing my tiles, I'm doing that thinking about moving up the tracks. I'm doing that thinking about the rover puzzle. And I'm doing that thinking about how to fill up the rows and columns. And none of those are so complicated or so demanding that I can't think about all of them, right? Like a lot of games, and that some games do have that interconnectedness, but it's so complex you can't actually engage with them. So I guess what I'm saying is this is one of those classic things where it feels like the game lives just beyond your cognitive horizon in terms of your ability to really maximize the efficiency of what's there, right? And I don't know.
I have like a slightly different take on that,
Okay.
but ultimately drawing the same conclusion, which is that it is a really surprisingly elegant game from the mechanism's perspective, because you're able it does so much with such simple core mechanism of grabbing a polyomino tile and placing on your board.
Yeah.
But I think the reason it feels that way isn't that all those different mechanisms and puzzles are so simple. It's because it is really presenting you with a sandbox. So players aren't actually engaging with all those things on their given turn. They're just picking one or two. They're like, I want
Sure.
to go up on the black track. Okay,
So I
this
can draw a
tile
card.
has
Yeah.
that and it can fit here.
Yeah.
I don't have to be considering, the objectives on that turn at all, or I don't have to be considering the tile. You're always kind of doing the columns, right? Because that's just like the core thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
On your board,
I
tiling
think
your
it
board.
right, like the columns and rows.
Yeah.
Like you're always going to be thinking that because you're always putting something down on your board. But I think the game kind of allows players to sort of pick what they want to be doing. Like I want to be doing the rover puzzle. I'm going to like try and maximize my corporation, or I'm trying to get to the top of this track, and then it can kind of like get out of your way. And while the actual boards and corporations don't seem very balanced, like the actual core mechanism of like even after my 15 plays, it's not totally clear to me like, okay, like really I should be just like focusing on filling up my board the whole time, or like
Mm.
really I should be focusing on
Yeah.
these 2 or 3 tracks. It
It
feels like you
depends.
can do different things. Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends, and do well in the game.
Yeah. In a really rewarding way. It totally depends. And I will say, yes, Jake, I do try to force the rovers more than I should. Because it's just fun. I love moving the little rover around, picking up the meteorites. It feels so good. Picking up the life pods. They only give you 1 point. I still like to get them.
The life pods might be a little bit of a trap, I
I
think.
think the life pods are a trap. Yeah. You
Yeah.
can, because it's only 1 point, oftentimes the right decision is probably to just lay a tile on top of it and smash it. It's a
Yeah.
bonus. It's not an objective you have to shoot for. Though, have
And
you,
like putting a rover off of a tile, and then you don't want to like it you can drive your rover off the tile onto your board,
yeah,
but then if you put a piece on the space where the rover is, then the rover gets smashed, which
yep.
is devastating. So
But can be the right decision at times, which is interesting.
it could be, sure, but the life pod being off the board means you have to take your rover off the board. It's like
Yeah.
it feels like a pretty big tempo loss to get the 1 point.
Have you played the corporation board where the life pods go onto your tracks and you can skip over them and you get to move them around when you collect
I
them?
think I did,
That
yeah.
one's cool. Or the
That's
one where
awesome.
you get like special powers when you get the life pods. I think those make it
Oh, that I
more
think that's what I
interesting.
was thinking of. It
Okay.
definitely yeah, right. So of course,
There's
as
an
we said,
exception to every rule.
there's an exception to everything, and it's cool that they are there
Yeah.
because the designer is like then like, okay, what's like the wildest thing we could do with these life pods that we
Yeah.
have?
Yeah.
Let's make a couple factions for that.
Have you have you played the one where the rover gets to move diagonally?
I don't think I
That's
played that one
super fun.
either.
It's so fun because normally it just moves orthogonally and it just it changes the whole
I
puzzle.
like my favorite rover one is the one where the rover, if they're holding a meteorite, they get to do a free movement.
Yeah, yeah. That's super fun. Pick up and
That one's
deliver
great.
one. Yeah, yeah.
That one's awesome.
Should we talk about the objectives, Jake? It's a if you
Yeah,
feel that you don't always have to fill up your whole board, I think it's important for us to talk about objectives and if we feel though if maybe those are the lodestar. Do you always have to do those?
I think if I was introducing the game to a brand new player and they're like, okay, what should I focus on? That's probably the best place to
Yeah.
point them, because that's the most zero sum thing, right? You're always going up the track to some extent. You're always doing something with completing columns and rows, but you could just get no objective points. And I don't think you're going to do well getting no objective points.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think about the design of the objectives?
Okay, so right now we're talking about do you want to talk about the 2-player version or the 3-player version?
Let's talk about the
Or
three.
just the design of the objectives generally as
Okay, well,
as what they're instructing
at
you
one
to
point I was
do.
going to talk about some of the things that I think is just like sloppy design about this game, and one of
Yeah.
them is the way the objectives work in a 3-player game, which is cool. You have one personal objective, and then you're competing with the person on your right and the person on your left for various objectives. That's kind of interesting, right? Trying to like add a little bit more interaction than you would otherwise have in the game. It's a little bit of like a between two cities type of vibe or whatever. where all of a sudden I'm caring about somebody else's board. However, you could literally have on your right have the fewest life pods collected, and on your left have the most life pods collected.
Yeah.
And the other players around the table aren't dealing with that same amount of like anti synergy in their
Yeah.
objectives. So that just stinks. Like if you're sitting there in that position, it's just like that doesn't need to be there, right? Like we
Yeah.
could just say that's kind of like a little bit of sloppy design. Now it doesn't matter. Like the game is still super fun, but I can't say I think that literally happened to me the first time I played this game, and I was just like,
What?
"What?" Like I can't. I'm just like I can't even believe this is an experience that you could have with the game. And I also think that okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and we have talked about how there's enough going on in Planet Unknown, and there's enough ways to score points, and the game, the system is flexible enough that it probably didn't have that. You were probably fine in terms of your chances of winning, but it just feels bad when a game
Right.
tells you that, right? It doesn't feel good when a game says do this and don't do this at the same time. As a player, we want the objectives to be clear in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, and it just it feels like this negative edge that's being forced towards your game playing throat.
Yeah. I also think just like some of the design of them is just kind of like wonky too. Like some of them are just so insanely hard to achieve, and others are just like way easy and they're worth the same.
Do you want to throw out an example?
The one that is like get a 2x5 shape of
Yeah.
all the same type is just incredibly onerous to try to achieve.
It messes up your board. Yeah.
It's going to screw up like everything else you're trying to do, where one of the other ones could just be like have, I don't know, like instead of having it all in one space, it could be like have the same amount of tiles, but like you want to have like 5 different segments of the same type of resource. And that's just like tremendously less onerous. So it just makes it's just kind of like weird. And usually
or have
you
them
can
on the
pick,
edge of your board.
yeah. So I don't know. Like it's a nitpick, but it's definitely something that like stood out to me. Like, huh? Like it for a game that is this good and this fun and like has had this much development done on it. You just don't expect to see that.
I find that in addition to sort of situations like you just described, which is a frustrating player experience, oftentimes the objectives like what I mentioned in terms of have the most of this tile type on the edge of the board, or what you mentioned, make the 2x5 grid of this tile type, don't actually lead to that interesting of decisions. They kind of narrow the decision space in a way that's sort of frustrating. Because I found, at least in our 2-player games, that accomplishing the objectives really matters. In a 2-player game, the player who wins most of the objectives usually is the one of us to sort of take the game. And so you really have to care about them. And it's a little frustrating that at least in the 2-player game, the game kind of tells you focus on the system that's not maybe the most fun part of the game and has incentivized sort of doing the hard work to make it happen. But there are fun moments where you get glimmers of interesting decisions, but at the same time, it's just there's this tonal conflict between this objective system and the way that the rest of the game presents your pursuit of points that's a little bit, I don't know, at odds with itself. It's a little prog rock.
I might be like kind of cooling on global objectives that are zero sum. Like I like it more in Cascadia where it's like do this as well as you can.
Yeah.
Versus like the
one player is going to get 5 points.
The first person to achieve this gets it.
Yeah.
You know, because that just feels so important. And I think you're right. It narrows the decision space so much. I just played a game, funny that we're talking about this, called Moon by the publishers of Villagers. That's like global objectives, the game. They're like, we played a 4-player game. There's 16 global objectives that you had to like, that's too many of those.
16?
No, wait. No, I said it wrong. 12. So there's like 1 per player in the game times 3. So we play a 4-player game. So we're 4 bronze, 3 bronze ones. 4 bronze, 4 silver, 4 gold. Wow. Sorry for that aside. But yeah, I was like, this stinks that we're like, what are we supposed to like memorize these 12 goals
12 objectives,
before we start playing? Yeah. I really liked the game otherwise, but that was like, huh? And yeah, so having it come up here as kind of like a sticky thing that I agree with, it's kind of like, wait, maybe I'm not crazy because it just feels like a little bit ham-fisted, like player interaction. Like I got you want player interaction? I got your player interaction right here. It's
We're
this
all
card.
trying to do this. Yeah, it's this grid of things that we've set out. Yeah. How do you want to close on Planet Unknown, Jake?
Can I
What's
talk
like?
about can I talk about one other thing that I think is sloppy? Just
Yeah,
real quick.
great. But
We're doing a little bit of turbulence,
yeah,
The black track gives you like these like Civ cards,
yeah,
and those are so strangely balanced to me too, because like whenever you get one, you get to look at 3 and take one.
yep,
And there's like a set collection card
yep,
in it that gives you like if you have one of them, you get 1 point. It's like triangular scoring or
yeah,
something, but
more or
if you
less,
get
yeah,
4, you get 10, meaning each is worth 2.5 points per.
yeah, per card.
But then, like, in the 4th set, some of them just give you, like, 3 points right
Yeah,
there. So it's just like, what are we doing with the set collection? It doesn't like, why would I ever go for this? Right, and
it's
why would I ever go for that? It doesn't.
I don't know, and it's total trap. And at times, it's like, yeah. Early on, I was like, "Oh, fun! I'm gonna get lots
I
of
know,
points
I
from this."
like that. I, like, wanted to, like, go f like, my first
Yeah,
few time, I'm like, "I'm gonna go for this because that's, like, cool." Like, I'm gonna try and, like, collect these. I like
yeah,
collecting things. It's, like, total trap. And
punished.
then
Yeah,
there's, like, a meteor one that's, like, kinda the same.
yeah.
So, that's just, like, so strange. But don't let it deter you from playing this game. I just, like, I had to say, like, "I don't understand this."
Do you have a planet that just really stuck out to you, an asymmetric planet that you want to talk about? And I'll go first so you can sort of think about it. But
Okay.
I have one that stuck out to me as really frustrating that I played twice in a row that I never want to play again. It's called Pajitnov, which I think is actually a great name because Alexei Pajitnov, I believe, is the designer of Tetris. So that might, I'm just realizing right now as we're recording, be a nod to the designer of Tetris, which is really sweet. And the power is the tile must be able to slide into place from any direction. So basically, what this is saying is like if you have a little L and it has to like slide into place like in Tetris. You're playing Tetris in Planet Unknown on your board, but the Tetris can be from any direction. This was so frustrating. I felt like it made my decisions around tile placement so much significantly more difficult. Just like this spatial puzzle felt like a totally different game in a way that was maddening. Where I'd set up these things and I was like, "Wow, my board's going perfectly," and I was like, "Oh wait, I can't slide this. I can't actually place that there. This is rough." And then yeah, the Cerebus one that I talked about is really cool. I also played with this planet, Jake, called Sharbidus, where you have to start from the inside. I found that to just be like a fun little twist. It's like cool. I don't start from the outside of the board. I get to tile from the inside out. You know?
It's so interesting that, like, the planets feel almost like there are some of the planets just feel like almost they're just hard mode, right? Like,
Yeah,
at least in the implementation on Board Game Arena, you could always just pick the base planet. And so often I'm looking at my board, and I was always picking the like asymmetric planet I was presented with just to try out new stuff because that was
yeah.
fun. But so often I'm looking at my board like, why would I ever
Why would
choose
I pick
this
this side?
planet?
Yeah,
It's like super hard, and like there's like the only better thing about it is like maybe there's like 2 more ice on it or something than the
yeah.
base planet. One of the ones that sticks out to me was it's called Arashi. Did you play this one? It's the one that has like the ring on
Ring.
it.
Yeah,
So it's like a giant ring that goes through the middle of the board, and you can't place any tiles in there unless they extend beyond that as well. It just creates like a really interesting placement puzzle of like right where you want to kind of like set up shop, you can't.
yeah, yeah. Right
So
in the center of your whole board.
yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, those are cool. I think the for my like decision space brain, like a lot of the meat of the asymmetry was in the civilizations more or the corporations
corporations.
more.
Yeah,
And I was I think that's kind of maybe where I would like to end and just give a huge since I've been critical at times of some of the design things that are just strike me as odd in this game. Such a huge hat tip to the creativity of the designers
yeah,
for just doing, you like that Tetris board. It's just wild. It's crazy, right? It's like
hmm,
every idea that they had, they just ran with it. And I think there's just such a lesser version of this game that comes with, maybe 8 or 4 or 5, or 6 if it's a 6-player game or whatever, like well balanced, but just like a little bit different corpse or a little
yeah,
bit different planets. And I'm so happy that they decided to just go for the extreme because that feels like something different than we get in so many other Euro games.
Yeah.
So it's something that I struggle with, right? Like, obviously, people want games to be balanced, but that's sort of a repeated theme is like, at what cost?
Yeah.
And I don't think, maybe the balanced version of this game wouldn't have the objectives I don't like or the weird like Civ cards that I don't like, but it would probably also not have so many of like the corporations and planets that was where I found the most joy in this game. So it's just an interesting case study and balance. Again, I'm glad that some designers are taking it to saying like, you know what, screw it.
Yeah. And this is the kind of game that without crowdfunding, right? Like you often don't get the more is more approach from a traditional publisher just because there's a lot of risk involved with putting so much time and so much design. There's a lot of art in this game because there's so many unique boards and unique art. You need unique art for all of those boards, and that's really expensive. I don't think you get something like that without crowdfunding. So in some ways, Planet Unknown for me might be one of my favorite crowdfunding games I've ever played.
Yeah.
So for that, I kind of want to applaud it for sort of taking this form that gets to exist because there's a new way that games can come to existence and do a good job with the more is more thing. And it doesn't do a perfect job. We've had our criticisms, but it's enough that it's like, oh yeah, this is fun as heck. I want to play this game.
I'm actively trying to track down a copy of it.
Yeah.
So
it's pricey.
Yeah. So allegedly they've got it at Barnes and Nobles somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes. Okay. So
I'll keep an eye out, and if I see it, I'll snag one for you too.
Thanks. Yeah, every time I go, I'm like, which is not often. The twice that I've gone, nope, no Planet Unknowns here. Anyway, so Brenda, I think that's the end of the episode. That's our deep dive on Planet Unknown. Can't wait to hear what other people think about this game. In our Discord, we'll have a thread up where you can talk about this episode. You can talk more about this game. And thank you all so much for joining us this week on Decision Space.
If you are one of our pre-planners who likes to play games with us, know that coming up in the future at some point, we're going to cover Ticket to Ride. We'll also be covering Taverns of Tiefenthal, the Wolfgang Warsch deck building game, all about rolling dice, drafting them, putting them on cards. That's really fun. It's available to play online on Yucata. We're also still covering Food Chain Magnate this year. And if previously you got excited that we were covering Navigator, probably not going to cover it just because we want to cover games with more interesting themes, and we'll just leave it at that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again, and we will see you next week. Wait, did we say Hembry? Did you say
No,
Hembry?
We got to thank Hembry for their intro and outro song, Reach Out.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.